Hello and welcome to another LSB Film Podcast with me, your host, Kristofer Brooks. Today's guest is Toshi, an economic historian with a bold, thought-provoking theory. According to Toshi, history doesn't just repeat itself. It rhymes in patterns that we quite often overlook, from the Spanish flu to the banking crash in 2008. He connects the dots between these major events which might surprise you. But here's what really caught me off guard. Bitcoin, the original version, it's not what I thought it was. It turns out it plays a much bigger and a more complex role in the global system than just being digital currency. I won't spoil it all here, but let's just say that this conversation might change the way that you view history and possibly how you look to the future. So without further ado, let's dive straight in.
Are you concerned about all this corruption being rebranded as conspiracy theory? Well, don't you worry. Sit back and relax and join in the conversation with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
So, welcome very much to the show, Toshi. For the benefit of the audience, and I'm just letting them know that my signal has been really bad here for whatever reason. It's been really slow. So for the sake of smoothness, we've decided to go just audio. So Toshi, welcome to the podcast. And can you just give us a little bit of a rundown as to who you are and what it is that we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Chris. It's always great to meet fellow people who understand the problem that we're facing. I was just quietly, enjoying my life, living in the private until 2020 came along, and everybody knows what happened in 2020 because there was a GB jabby that was mandated. Although nobody really truly understood the significance of the word mandated. Does that mean it's an order? Is it a demand? Is it a request? Are we contractually obliged to have this thing? Like, what do they mean by mandate?
I believe it's an invitation.
Well, it could well be, It's certainly not an order or a demand or a contract. But one of the things I did know is that it broke all the conditions of the Nuremberg Code, for medical testing on human beings. It was developed after World War II. And I thought, whoa, hold on a minute. How on earth are they getting away with this? Because the narrative was Granny's probably got her jabby, but her jabby doesn't work unless you get your jabby as well. Even though it's safe and effective. If only I get mine as well. And why do I need it when I'm not really that vulnerable?
Well, that's it. Well, if you could put some petrol in your car, please, because my petrol's running low.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the madness.
Yeah. So I knew that there was something very wrong. And then I was just like, this is so serious, and it was so big, and all the countries around the world were going in lockstep. And, any dissenting opinion or any even discussion about an alternative was completely shut down. So I was just like, this is so big. What on earth is going on? Even the doctors, it was just like, well, hold on a second. What is this thing? There were a few doctors who got absolutely hounded for saying, well, actually, this isn't too bad. There are alternatives. And I didn't realize at the time, but that there couldn't be any alternatives, or else they wouldn't have been able to enforce this on everybody. But when you look at who was involved, it was all the politicians. It was the majority of the doctors, and those good doctors who were being shouted down were being like hounded. The police weren't stopping it. The hospitals were in on it. The media was in on it. I was just like, this is just absolutely enormous. And then I was just like, this is so big, we need to start looking back at history, because World War II only finished in 1945, and that was only, 80 years ago? Well, 75 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just like, well, this was a world war. You don't just suddenly finish a world war and everyone's like, oh, you won. Well done, chap. Excellent job. You beat me. Yeah, it's just like, hold on a minute. There are going to be grievances here, serious grievances, because of what went on during that war. And I knew from my own sort of background and economic history that I'd been following the money, that there was economic terrorism when I was growing up was going on in Japan with the Japanese economic miracle, and in the tiger economies in South Korea, Thailand, and Indonesia, where the International Monetary Fund had come in. They'd offered these loans and got these countries in debt, put interest rates up after they'd given the loans, and just caused absolute mayhem. I was just like, whoa, whoever has done that is probably from the West, because you don't shit where you eat. Well, you're not meant to anyway. But then when you look back through history and you get to the likes of Albert Pike's Letters to Mazzini, written on the 15th of August 1871, that outlined how it would take 3 world wars to bring about a totalitarian one world government and new world order. And then you realize that, what the whole purpose of World War One was to accumulate huge amounts of profits through the printing of currency that they made from nothing, due to the creation of the Federal Reserve that happened in 1930, and literally the year before the war started in 1914. So it's just like, well, if you want to make a killing in terms of profits, and you own a bank that can print currency from nothing, you want to be in bed with weapons manufacturers when a war is started, because weapons are the consumable products with the largest profit margins. The citizens of the country are going to say, oh yeah, congratulations, we don't mind you printing all this currency and creating all these weapons because we're being attacked. We need it. It's for the greater good and all this kind of stuff. Absolutely. But then you even look behind the sort of politics of World War One, and then you look at the Balfour Declaration written on the 2nd of November 1917, and then you think, well, hold on a minute, that's quite a significant achievement. And then the war suddenly finished the following year in 1918. But then they were also, injecting the soldiers in 1917 and then sending them off to the front lines in Europe. And then they were coming back, and, they called it the Spanish flu pandemic. That killed more people than they killed in World War One. But the whole purpose of World War One was they wanted a place of sanctuary when they knew that they were going to be committing mass high treason on everybody. They were just like, well, we can't do this unless we've got a safe place to run to. And that safe place to run to now begins with the letter I and finishes with the letter L in the Middle East. And so that's their
and
sort of...
Is it real?
That's the one. That's the one. So first of all, they needed a country to make their own that they could run to if ever they got in trouble. So that was the whole point of World War One, and they're creating these massive bubbles. And the whole point of World War One, where they accumulated mass profits, then they invested those profits in the stock market between 1918 and 1920, and then they started pumping huge amounts of currency into the economy to overvalue all the corporations they've invested in, to multiply the profits they'd accumulated during World War One by like a factor of 10 or 20. The rug pulled in 1929, and then used all the profits they'd accumulated during World War One to scoop up all the economically distressed corporations in America. So they got hold of London after the Battle of Waterloo, when they sent a message back saying, oh, Napoleon had won and he's going to conquer everything, creating a massive panic fire sale. Then the message got back that actually Napoleon had lost and Wellington had been successful. They already owned London by then. Over 3 days, they bought it up. So they bought London in 1815. They got hold of America during the 1930s and the Great Depression. And then they started funding Hitler to get Hitler to instigate a war in Europe, to drain the European countries of the gold reserves while they were supplying both sides with gold. And then when they had enough gold in 1944, they were just like, let's point out to all the European countries that they now no longer have enough gold in their banks to back the amount of currency they have in circulation, because we've got it. So therefore, their currency must be backed by our currency, and it's our currency that's going to be backed by gold because we've got it all. And that was the Bretton Woods Agreement, and that was the whole purpose of World War II, which is why World War II finished the following year in 1945. And again, what they did in 1945 was then started pumping currency into the economy to overvalue all the corporations they'd scooped up during the Great Depression in America, to overvalue them, to legitimately raise capital against them, to then purchase all the European corporations that Hitler had decimated for them. So now they've got London, America, and they've got Europe. And then next you've got the Japanese economic miracle from 1970 to 1990. And then you've got the tiger economies that they went after in the 2000s. And then after that, sort of modern day, you had Bill Clinton signing the Commodities Futures Modernization Act in 2000, which caused deregulation in the market. That was then covered up the following year by the acts of 9/11. So nobody was concentrating on that, but 9/11, gave them the excuse to bring in the surveillance state. And then you had the financial crisis in 2008, where they were stealing people's homes. Then you had the flash crash on May 6, 2010, where they pretty much stole all the corporations on the Dow Jones stock market, and that was 2010. And then COVID onwards, because we all saw the ceremony at the London Olympics in 2012, where they had that that death character walking around with a bloody a needle, and all these characters jumping across hospital beds. I mean, how freaky was that?
That was a little bit weird, wasn't it? To say the least.
An understatement.
Yeah,
an understatement. So, but the reason they've done this is because what we're actually up against is religious extremism, and again, it goes back to sort of the biblical times as to who these people are, but they're following an instruction by God, where basically God says, get rid of the rest of the world and you can have a world of your own. This is what they're doing. And if you want to carry out any plan and get rid of a problem that size, you have to do it economically. So in the same way that when David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger orchestrated the Great Leap Forward in China, where, between 15 and 55 million people in China perished due to, man-made errors, that's pretty much what they're doing here. But it was Henry Kissinger who said, who controls the food supply controls the people, who controls the energy can control whole continents, who controls money controls the world. And in that statement, he was telling us indirectly the order in which they're doing things. First of all, they're going to go for control of the money and the financial system. Then they're going to go for the energy companies and utilities. And last of all, they're going to go for the food supply and the farmers, which we're seeing now. But everything depends on their control of the financial system through their central banking system. And so the issue is, well, how have they done this? And if people understood what money was, they would be able to see the fraud that's being perpetrated on them. But people don't know the difference between money and currency, because they've purposely made economics stuffy and boring, and people are completely ignorant of it. But when I say to people, look, there are only 4 things that circulate within an economy. What are they? And they will say, goods and services. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. That's 2 out of 4. What are the next 2? And they're like, I don't know. And the moment I mention, commodities and securities, they're just like, I don't get it. I've got to speak to my financial advisor about this. I'm not really too sure what they are. And I'm just like, good grief. They're as basic as goods and services. And you're trying to tell me you don't know who they are and having a bit of a panic attack because you don't know what they are. So I was just like, I need to start explaining this to people and try to make it as clear as possible. So the words money and currency are involved in the economy. So they have to come under one of those 4 headings, which is either goods, services, commodities, or securities. So the word commodity is an amalgamation of 3 words. It's first of all something that's common. So in other words, there's no human barrier to entry to accessing it. That's then been itemized and then uniquely identified so that someone can have a claim on that common item, and it can therefore be used as a medium of exchange in a common market. Now, you only need a medium of exchange when a third party comes into trade and an economy is created. Because when there's 2 people, you can just barter, you can swap like for like. That's it. You only need a medium of exchange when the third party comes in, so you can exchange your unique goods and services for something of common value that you can then spend later and on with someone else.
Yeah.
So a commodity is literally something that's first of all common, so no human barrier to entry, that's then been itemized and then uniquely identified. So a commodity is a common item identified. That's what the word is made up of. You can see it in the word COMMO and then IT and then DITY, common item identity, effectively. So what happens is when you are using a commodity, either coffee or wheat, or in all the cities that you go to, they've all got the corn exchange.
Yeah.
Well, the corn exchange was a staple part of everybody's diet. So in the back in the day, they would use wheat as a base for all common value in local common markets, because everybody needed corn, to create wheat. So that was kind of like the money back then. But then when the world became more interconnected, you then effectively needed a world money, which is why, corn isn't suitable for for worldwide trade, because you need such a lot of it if you're shipping huge amounts of minerals from one country to another. Which is why gold ended up being the money that the countries would then use, to swap for and pay for minerals like oil or coal or copper or iron or whatever sort of countries had. So what happens is, when commodities are being used as a medium of exchange, a medium of exchange is a tool that enables, encourages, and accelerates the facilitation of trade. So they then become economically competitive to one another, which means over time, these commodities will outcompete one another as a medium of exchange until everybody settles on just one. So what happens is, when a commodity eventually monopolizes a market due to its ability to be used as a medium of exchange, it becomes a monopoly commodity and recognized as money. That's what money is. So money takes time to emerge. It's a monopoly commodity. And that's where the word comes from, mon being the singular, the y being the commodity. So that's what money is. Currency, on the other hand, is a security. So a security is issued by a central authority that will back up and secure your claim of entitlement to something. So a security is literally a ticket, a token, a voucher, a gift card, a wristband, a certificate. Like a wristband will entitle you to enter a festival. A ticket will entitle you to enter a concert. A token will allow you to, entitle you to enter an arcade.
So just the value of exchange, basically.
Well, just an inanimate object that secures your entitlement to something else. So let's say, for example, a tiddlywink. A tiddlywink has no value whatsoever. But if that tiddlywink entitled you to a claim on £1 million house, then that tiddlywink takes on the value of the asset that it secures your entitlement to, which is £1 million house. So that tiddlywink then takes on the value of £1 million, because that's what it's worth. So that tiddlywink would then be a security, because it secures your entitlement. But whoever it is that issued that tiddlywink to you would have to back up your claim if a dispute arose and somebody else said, well, actually, that's my house. And they'd be like, well, no, the tiddlywink is the security for the house, which we initially owned and controlled, and we've sold it to this individual here. That house is theirs. This is the security for it. So the reason people get confused about what securities are is because if somebody issues a security like a tiddlywink and spins you a story that it, supposedly secures your entitlement to a claim on something, but it doesn't, well, that's securities fraud. And there are things that you can't securitize, like luck. You can't securitize luck. You can't say, here's a token that secures your entitlement to luck, because you can't guarantee luck.
No.
Same with chance or opportunity. You can't securitize chance. You can't securitize opportunity. And something else you can't securitize is a promise, because a promise is not a contract. A promise, therefore, cannot be enforced. A promise, therefore, has no value, which means you can't securitize a promise. So a promissory note is bullshit. So a promissory note is securities fraud, which is what we've been led to believe, is money. When it's not. It's fraud, because this lot can print as many promissory notes from nothing, which means you're counterfeiting effectively, and say, we're allowed to do this, but you're not. Well, hold on a minute. Statutes of Monopoly 1623 specifically says it is unlawful to have a monopoly on anything. You can't say, oh, I'm allowed to do something, but you're not. In the same way that you can't license a crime. You can't say, oh, well, I can commit this crime because I'm licensed to do so. No, that's a crime. You can't license a crime. You can't say, oh, yeah, because I've been licensed, I can now go around and rob and rape people. No, that's not the way it works. So when these banks are saying, oh, we're issuing promissory notes, but you're not allowed to, well, that's unlawful. And these promissory notes have no value whatsoever. And so they used to be securities on the claim on gold. But what happened was, after the Bretton Woods Agreement, when the European countries had their currency backed by the US dollar, because the Americans stolen all the gold conveniently. But then on the 15th of August 1971, Richard Nixon said, that gold we promised you, you're not getting it. We're removing the dollar from the gold standard. So that means that all US dollar and all currencies backed by it immediately became securities fraud because they didn't secure your entitlement to anything of value. So currency is meant to secure your entitlement to the value of the money, which is the commodity. But when you remove money from currency, that's when you end up with securities fraud as defined by SEC versus W.J. Howico 1946. So this lot effectively purposely orchestrated World War II for the purpose of stealing all the gold and then committing securities fraud on the entire world. And the reason they orchestrated the Nixon shock on the 15th of August 1971 is because that was the 100-year anniversary of Albert Pike's letter to Mazzini, where he outlined how it would take 3 world wars to bring about a totalitarian one world government and new world order. And they knew that once they had control of the financial system and they'd created a reserve currency that they could print to infinity, that everything else would just simply fall like dominoes, because all legal and political influence stem from economic power. And this is where I need to talk about Bitcoin, because if you want to know what the most valuable money is going to be, what you need to do is commoditize the most useful resource. And the most useful resource in today's day and age is digital data. So if you can somehow commoditize data and make it valuable, then you can send that data as fast and as efficient as light and its true value. So this is why I'm desperate to try and explain what Bitcoin is to people and yourself, because this is the only way we're going to get out of this. Because this lot, they own all the world's resources. Because fiat currency is a method of asset stripping people. They print currency from nothing, and they get you to hand over your goods and services and all your your sweat equity and
Well, it's a debt based currency, isn't it?
Well, again, I mean that it's fraud. So you can't have a debt on something that doesn't have any substance. Because they make this up from nothing. So again, even debt, them charging usury on it, charging interest, even that's fraud. And as Lord Denning said in Lazarus Estates versus Beazley, if fraud is found anywhere in the process, it null and voids and vitiates the entire process. So the entire world as we know it now runs on securities fraud, which means everything is fraud. Literally, if the money is corrupt, everything is corrupt. And this is the situation that we're in. Because this lot, they've got all the technology, they built CERN, they own all the weapons manufacturers, they own all the tech industries, they own all the communications. I mean, we are in so much trouble that I'm desperate to explain this to people, because the only way we get out of this is if we take their economic power away from them, which they are perpetrating on us through fraud, and move on to a true monetary system. And this is why they're so scared about Bitcoin. So I'll tell you a little bit about this, and I'll explain what they've done, which illustrates why they are so concerned about it.
Okay, so this sounds very interesting.
You're probably familiar with the SPARS pandemic, which was published October 2017. That was then what's the word? Not brought to life or imitated in Event 201. Where a simulation is what it was. A simulation, where they simulated, the effects that COVID was going to have on the world. And in this document that they published of October 2017, they got absolutely everything spot on. The only thing they got wrong was the year. They said it was going to happen in 2025. Instead, they brought it forward a few years early. And the reason they brought it forward is because of the scaling of Bitcoin. So you'll notice how I said the SPARS pandemic was published on the 31st of October 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this lot that we're dealing with, they believe in black magic and karma and all this hocus pocus stuff. They absolutely believe in it.
Oh yeah, they have to tell you. They have to tell you for their karmatic debt.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bitcoin white paper was also published on the 31st of October, but in a different year. It was 2008. Now, if we start using a common money and you start using a sovereign money, that money will enable us to get our political sovereignty back because they won't have any financial coercion over us. So literally, the Bitcoin white paper, when it expressed how to commoditize digital data, if we start using data as money, that will give us our freedoms back. That will give us our sovereignty back. And so this lot were just like, right, well, we recognize this. And so therefore, we want to somehow counteract the energy that the Bitcoin white paper has got. And we'll release our SPARS pandemic, which will outline how, a worldwide pandemic will usher in the power of the World Health Organization. And behind that will follow, our totalitarian, one world government regime. Mm-hmm. So that's why they released the SPARS pandemic on the 31st of October, 2017. And the reason they brought COVID forward is because if you are going to create a commoditized digital network, that network has to go through a process of commoditization, which is a period of neutral organic growth. So in the same way that tree roots, grow in the ground, and the same way that gold was already distributed around the world without any human intervention, Bitcoin somehow needed to do the same. Bitcoin needed to be distributed all around the world without any central point of influence. Mm-hmm. So in order to give this starting point commonality, to add something that's common to the starting point, a common, equal, and reasonable opportunity had to be provided so that anybody could start the network themselves. And this is why Satoshi Nakamoto released the white paper on the 31st of October 2008, but didn't start the network until the 3rd of January 2009. Because a reasonable amount of time in law is considered 2 months. So he knew that he had to provide a 2 months period for anybody and everyone to start the network themselves, to take the initiative. A bit like gold already being in the ground waiting to be discovered by someone. The information about how to create and start the Bitcoin network had to be released to the world for anybody to take advantage of and take the initiative of. So when nobody did that, he was just like, right, that's 2 months past. I will now start the network myself. I will then step back from the project and I will just simply let the network grow organically without any central point of influence so that it can be classified as a commoditized network. And so, what happens is you download the Bitcoin software and you start mining or, extracting Bitcoin from the system. And this process had to go on for a period of 10 years. But that process finished on the 1st of January 2020. And when the cabal recognized this, they shit themselves and they were just like, oh, crikey, this neutral organic growth phase is about to come to an end. Satoshi Nakamoto is about to reveal his true identity. And if they start listening to him, people might start using a money that's outside of our central banking system. Oh, shit, what can we do? Quick, let's lock the country down so that people aren't spending anything. That was the whole point of COVID, was to just simply lock the economy down so that nobody was spending anything, so that then nobody would spend Bitcoin. They would all be like locked in their homes listening to all this propaganda that was being broadcast. But the reason they did that in October of 2017 is because back in August of that same year, on the 1st of August 2017, they split the Bitcoin chain. And the reason they split the Bitcoin chain is because they had created their own alternative protocol that they would have central control of. because the way to remove all contractual credibility and claim, and therefore all economic value from a Bitcoin transaction, is you just simply have to remove the digital signatures from the transaction data, because Bitcoin is it's not tangible, it's not physical, you can't hold it in your hand. So therefore, the only way to prove that you've made a transaction and that somebody else has received that transaction is if your digital signature is on it. And therefore, you can prove a claim on the transaction, which means you therefore have contractual credibility with the individual that you've sent the transaction to. And therefore, if they either do a runner or you don't get the good or service that you expect in return, you can then, go to a third party, should you so wish to, and say, look, I either want the good or service I expected, or I want my money back. But without a digital signature on it, you have no claim. So you can't do it.
It's pretty much your receipt, isn't it? When you go to the supermarket and you come out with your receipt, if you've got a faulty item, you take it back with the receipt. So yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, spot on with that one. So they were just like, well, and also on the Bitcoin network, if you remove the digital signatures from anything that you do, it means that developers who are, creating things on it, they can then make changes to the fundamental protocol without anybody knowing, because there will be no digital signatures on any changes that are made, which means they have complete control of the network. So they realized, they were just like, oh, right, well, in order to deceive people into thinking that this is Bitcoin, all we need to do is collude with the crypto exchanges to list our new alternative protocol with the original ticker symbol, which is BTC. So they stole the ticker symbol, but what they couldn't hide is that when you make a fundamental change to the Bitcoin protocol, you fundamentally make a change in the code. And so Satoshi Nakamoto designed all genuine Bitcoin legacy addresses to start with the number 1, because number 1 is the first. Number 1 is the original. Number 1 is the first product off the production line. So once that number 1 has been reserved, nobody else can use it. So this lot were just like, right, okay, so we can create an alternative protocol, we can steal the ticker symbol, but we can't use the number 1 legacy address anymore. And their legacy addresses started to begin with the number 3, because that sort of looks like a B, or the letters BC. And when I started pointing this out on my channels got shut down. I was just like, hold on a minute, what on earth is going on here? I've literally just pointed out a very basic fundamental error that, because Bitcoin is a bit of code, and therefore if you change any fundamental part of the code, that same code can't receive it. So therefore the change is in the legacy address. And I only had a small channel of like, about 500, followers at the time. And I thought, oh, this must be a mistake. So I opened up another one, 24 hours, shut down again. Just because I was educating on what they'd done. And this was in 2017, before COVID and the pandemic in 2020. But the reason they want rid of Bitcoin is because if you make a commoditized digital network, that network doesn't have any central point of authority or control. And Bitcoin is a bit of NFT data that is extracted from this network that doesn't have any central point of authority or control. So therefore, you can also apply that to data that is uploaded to it. So if you upload information to this same network that the token of Bitcoin came from, then that digital information also doesn't have any central point of authority, control, or failure, meaning it can't be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, or censored. And what they don't want people to know is that you use the Bitcoin network in the same way that you use the internet. You buy Bitcoin in order to upload your data onto the network where it can't be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, and it's not susceptible to cybersecurity hacks or virus software. So if you are a financial institution like Visa, MasterCard, or any of the central banks or anything like that, you can't afford to lose a single record of any of your customers. And the only digital network that is not susceptible to cybersecurity hacks and virus software is the Bitcoin network. That's what's so unique about it. So when they were saying, oh, Bitcoin, digital gold, not many use it, store of value, They don't want you to know what you actually use it for. So at the moment, we're having this conversation over a digital network, and it's going through a corporate server. And that corporate server can snoop on everything that we say, because we are surrendering the sovereignty of this, this digital content that we're creating to them, because they own the server. It's on their servers that we are using. However, if we were to be talking like this over the Bitcoin network, they can't listen to it, they can't spy on it, they have no claim on it, they can't delete it. And we own it. And that's what they don't want people to know. We could literally be having a conversation, a video call like this over the Bitcoin network. The Bitcoin network does everything. You can do HD streaming, social media content, telephone calls, your financial transactions, everything that the internet does, you can do on the Bitcoin network, where the information cannot be cracked, hacked, altered, changed, or deleted, and you have sovereignty and a claim over all of your content that you can then sell, to a worldwide audience. Should you so wish.
Is Odyssey run similar to that? Because that's all done in crypto money.
Yeah. So this is where you need to have a basic understanding of the fundamental protocol of Bitcoin. So I have tried to boil it down and I've tried to simplify it as much as I can. So I'll see how this goes on you when I explain it.
Okay, no pressure.
Okay. Yeah, only everybody's lives depending on it. So in order for a network to not have any central point of authority, control, or failure, it must be sustained by a distributed, economically competitive foundation. And the reason it has to be economically competitive is because without competition, you simply get collusion and centralization. Operations being economically competitive to one another are the only way to ensure that if one of them gets taken down, it will have literally no effect on the network whatsoever. None. It's the only way to separate things, which is through economic competition. So all the operations are completely independent to one another. So if one of them gets taken out, no big deal. So that's the foundation. If you have a foundation like that, there is no single central point of failure. So then what you need is, from that foundation, you need to have an index thread, for want of a better word, of information coming from that is all linked together via hash numbers. So if each upload has a reference number, which they call a hash number, with it, and that hash number is created from the previous bit of data that was uploaded to it, it means that you can't change any data on that network without changing everything on it. And the only way you can change everything on it is if you take out the foundation simultaneously at the same time. And bearing in mind, the foundation is globally distributed and economically competitive and has been growing for 10 years. And this lot don't have global jurisdiction yet, or worldwide jurisdiction, which is why they're so desperate to bring in a totalitarian one world government. And to claim to everybody, oh, you've got to shut all your mining farms down, because they can't find them, and they don't know where they are. So the way these miners compete with one another is by extracting Bitcoin from the network, and we buy Bitcoin in order to upload our information back onto the network, where it can't be censored. Where we literally have our freedom, our digital sovereignty back. And because that service has value, then you can then start using Bitcoin, the actual coin itself, as a medium of exchange, as well as to use the network with, in the same way that you would use the internet. And this is probably the most valuable commodity on earth, the most valuable service on earth, because everything these days is digital. Phone calls, emails, social media, financial transactions, news broadcasts, HD streams.
But is there a possibility though where they can just pull the plug on the internet?
So all the operations that economically sustain the Bitcoin network, they're all energy independent, all of them. You can't just simply turn them off because they're not plugged into the mains electric. They're either geothermal, solar, coal, hydroelectric. whatever it is. I mean, I've seen some amazing things. So what they've done is they're all energy independent, but they run on the same infrastructure. So the cabal could only get rid of Bitcoin if they tore up their own infrastructure that they've spent the last 30 years building. Yeah, which they also use themselves, which they're not gonna do, because Bitcoin is effectively a software, but sustained by all these operations that are energy independent. So all we need is to be energy independent ourselves. And you've probably seen these magnetic dynamos that people have started creating. Yeah. The most energy consuming items that we have in our houses are probably the fridge, freezer, the oven, and the washing machine. So it really wouldn't take much, one of these magnetic dynamos to get us off grid. And because the infrastructure is already in place, that's literally all we need. The Bitcoin miners are already energy independent. We just need to be energy independent ourselves, and that's it. We can use the network, and they won't be able to turn it off. But the banks finance business ideas that want to expand. They're never going to allow that idea out, because that's not what they want. They want us all on smart meters, and they want to be able to turn us off if we make any political statements that they don't like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we need is to somehow be self-financing to make this for us. And this is why they're so desperate to stop Bitcoin. So what they did is in 2019, they orchestrated a delist BSV campaign. And BSV was the market ticker that the original Bitcoin protocol ended up with after they'd stolen the initial one, which was BTC, and then another one that was BCH. BSV is the genuine Bitcoin. And so they were just like, right, if we can orchestrate a delist BSV campaign, we can steal everybody's genuine Bitcoin and then use those supplies to artificially suppress the price in the market, and then spin the narrative and say, oh, look at that. The market has decided that BSV is a scam, and the creator is a fraud, and it's not worth paying any attention to. But what that has done is given us a gift, because they've pushed the price so low that it's literally like $30, like 25 quid right now. And the scaling implementation that Satoshi Nakamoto has designed, that he couldn't start implementing until the neutral organic growth phase had come to an end, which was on the 1st of January 2020. This is literally due to come to, it's a closely guarded secret, but it's due to come on the network within the next few months. And this is why I'm desperately trying to get the news out to everybody, to tell them this, so that they can then make an informed decision. Because if you want to know what the value of this thing is, if I was to say to you, oh, I've got a kilogram, your question would be, well, that doesn't make sense, because a kilogram is a unit measurement of weight. I need to know what you have a kilogram of. You've got a kilogram of apples, pears, oranges, coffee, what? Same with the litre. If I said I've got a litre, well, a litre is a unit measurement of volume. So have you got a litre of air, a litre of oxygen, a litre of milk, a litre of coffee, a litre of oil? What do you have a litre of? Well, fiat currency is a unit measurement of value without any value backing it. So when a true commodity comes along that starts being used as money, that commodity will take on the market capitalization of every single market that is currently measured in fiat currency. So to work out the true value of this thing, what you would do is you would add up the sum total of all the world's financial markets and divide that by the supply of 21 million. And just to give you a rough idea, the largest market by far is the derivatives market, which is estimated to be between $1 and $1.2 quadrillion. So if you just divided $1 quadrillion by 21 million, you come up with a value of around $40 million per coin, which they have pushed down to 25 quid today.
That's insane.
Well, this is what we're facing. This is what I'm talking to you, mate.
Blimey.
Because this is the only opportunity we've got. And this scaling implementation that's coming on is really the genius behind Bitcoin, because the protocol of Bitcoin, the guy who invented it didn't have a choice in how he created it, because it's a concept. So in the same way that nobody invented the concept of the number one. the concept of the number one has been around since the beginning of time. All it took was for somebody to express it. You can draw it, you can write it, you can sign it, but the concept, you can't change the concept of the number one. And it's the same with commoditizing data. The concept of the Bitcoin protocol has always been there. There's been no choice in it. He was just simply the first individual to express it because he recognized it. But what he's come up is with this scaling implementation is he's solved what they call the unbounded scaling problem. And this is an issue that plagues the entire tech industry, which means there is no digital technology on Earth that can process more than 50 to 60,000 transactions per second. Visa, MasterCard, all the central banks, they're all stuck at 50 to 60,000 transactions per second because in order to get all of your clients onto the same software, you have to replicate that software in order to expand the program. And every time you replicate software, the copy isn't quite as perfect as the first. So in the same way as recording a tape recorder over and over and over, back in the day, by the time you've probably recorded it by the fifth or sixth time, the recording is so bad you can't even listen to it. And it's the same with replicating software. However, this unbounded scaling problem has solved that problem, and it will only be available on the original and genuine Bitcoin protocol, which is BSV. And when this implementation goes live, you will be able to use the Bitcoin network in the same way that you use the internet, because it will be able to absorb all the world's internet traffic, which means we will get our data sovereignty back and we will get our financial sovereignty back. So before this, with this lot and with their totalitarian one world government plan, we had no hope. There was literally nothing we could do. Whereas with the creation of Bitcoin, what he's effectively done and what we're faced with is effectively 21 million units of freedom stock. Literally. And this lot have pushed the price of this freedom stock down to like $25, like 20 quid. And this scaling implementation is due to come on in the next few months. I cannot stress how important it is that all those who understand what's going on in the world right now with this political system have to get behind this, because all legal and political influence stem from economic power. We need armies, and we need to start putting right what these bastards have done wrong.
Here, absolutely. Is there websites or links that I can share for people to find out more? Have you got your own website, or you mentioned channels earlier? Have you still got any channels?
I can't tell you about them directly on your show because everything that I ever try to broadcast gets taken down immediately.
Okay.
But if I network this to you privately and then you put it out privately, then we can get the information to people.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the best thing. But that's the situation that we're in right now, which is why I wanted to speak to you. So I hope you'd enjoyed it. Have I tried it? Has it been clear? I'm desperate to just try and explain myself as clearly and as simply as possible.
Well, for me, I struggle to retain quite a lot of things, but I mean, from what you've said it clearly.
Brilliant.
I get the gist of what you're saying. I didn't know. I honestly just thought Bitcoin was Bitcoin. It was a cryptocurrency. That was it. I had no idea about the internet and the content creation and all that kind of aspect of Bitcoin. So that's blown my mind. And so everything that you've since said, it's still quite a head fuck, because I didn't know that about Bitcoin. I just thought it was a way of dealing with money without dealing with the government. That was my basic knowledge of Bitcoin.
Well, this is why I'm trying to explain what Bitcoin really is and why it's important. But I found that when I first started broadcasting this information, again, I was attacked and my channels were taken down. So I was like, I can't broadcast this. Somehow I'm gonna just simply have to try and network this information out and try desperately to get people to listen to me. Because when obviously COVID first came out, everybody was going to the politicians and the doctors and the lawyers, and I was just like, oh my God, the solution is economic. And like literally, nobody was listening to me. But as I spoke to more and more people started listening, and eventually, I've ended up talking to you on your show.
Well, I'm glad that you have. It's been very enlightening, and I'm incredibly grateful for your time in trying to wake people up. And I genuinely hope that people listening to this have also had a bit of a jaw drop moment and and prepared to take the next step.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, we can. It's we've pretty much been almost going for an hour now anyway. So literally, Chris, you can call me anytime, mate.
Well,
Or
I
I'll
really
probably sort of
appreciate
send
that.
you information as well.
Yeah, send me whatever you want, and I'll always try and share stuff on my channel. I can perhaps maybe do it in a way that goes under the radar of YouTube. I don't know if I do it in a comical way.
Absolutely, always worth a try, mate. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Exactly. Well, listen, thank you so much, Toshi, for your time, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it as much as I have. Because wow, what a
Uh,
message!
been a pleasure, mate. Yeah,
Nice
we'll
one.
stay in contact and we'll speak again.
Absolutely. Okay. I will just say bye to the audience and then
Yep.
I shall say bye to you separately. So, yeah, there you go, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed that. Look after yourselves. And until next time, bye for now.